Whether you've been in the miniature painting hobby for a very long time or are a new starter, it's evolved massively over the last few years. Way faster than it did between the 80s and the late noughties. What used to be sticking a few bits of metal or plastic together has become super complicated sprues of ever more detailed models. You don't even have to buy every model from the same company anymore. Throw in the fact that you can now 3D print whole armies at home to rival the best that Games Workshop has to offer. We're entering a golden age of unlimited choice. And that's not limited to just models. There's now more miniature paint brands available than ever before. Updated ranges seemingly appearing every week, and within those brands are uniquely different types of paints. Speed paints, contrast paints, base and layer paints, dry paints, multiple types of washes, inks, acrylic gouache, artist grade colours, oils, enamels, triads and flexible triads. And most of these paints are now interchangeable by adding mediums. Thin speed paints make fantastic washes. Pro acryl can be a super long lasting dry brush. Single pigment colours can be mixed into a huge range of others. And it doesn't even end there, because the techniques have all had massive upgrades in quality, in speed, in efficiency. You can base, shade, layer and highlight. You can one-coat contrast. You can slap chop or zenithal prime and then add speed paints or inks. You can base coat, then oil wash and rub off what you don't want with cotton swabs and makeup sponges. You can brush, airbrush, rattle can, dry brush, stipple and sponge. There's now thousands of ways to heavy metal, contrast, grimdark, dry brush, glaze, wet blend, feather and weather your way to a full army. But, and yes, I always have a but, how do you choose between all the options available to you? Do you even make a choice or just stick to what you know best? Do you even care to improve? Or do you just want your models on the table? And well, I don't really want to do the same thing on every single model because it gets boring fast and there might just be something more efficient that I like doing better. Or at least hate less. I'm Will and you're watching The State of Play. I mentioned in my last video that I wanted to start a new hobby series. Not being a full-time YouTuber, I've started to envy the creators who appear to have endless hours to film a project they're working on and getting through that pile of shame. Since I started on YouTube, I've effectively allowed my spare time hobby to become making videos and not my actual hobby. I haven't tackled my gargantuan backlog for over a year and my games are now suffering because I've no new finished models to play with. I'm not going to lie to you, this is me justifying a way to get through my mountain of shame using YouTube. And if I don't add my models to my YouTube, they'll never get done, and I'll end up giving them away in gift bags at my funeral. So I'm going to start with assembly, specifically the tools, a topic that we all take for granted. If you already know this stuff, I make no apologies because I finally get to build some tiny soldiers. Assembly is my least favourite part of this hobby. Sprue nubs, mould lines, scraping and sanding, finding parts hidden somewhere at the far side of the sprue, and that super annoying way that some parts are connected. Model assembly has now become so much more complicated than it once was, sometimes ridiculously so. I remember having to glue a thumb onto the hand of one of my Ironhead prospectors. A thumb. This thing was the size of a pinhead. If I dropped that in my carpet, that dude was going to have to sit down to pee for the rest of his life. At this point, you're probably going to assume that my advice is going to be follow the instructions to the letter, except it's not. You see, before any of that, you have to decide how you want to paint your model because there's 3 different ways of assembling depending on how you choose to paint. Number 1, assemble the model in its entirety and glue it to a base. Number 2, assemble the model in its entirety and don't glue it to a base. And number 3, put the model together in sub-assemblies with maybe some parts glued to a base. The way you choose is going to be purely dependent on what hobby rules you subscribe to. If you lean towards if you can see it, you can get your brush to it, or if you can't see it, it doesn't matter, then build the entire model. Many models are assembled and posed in such a way that it's super easy to get your brush to all parts of it. But some models are like playing Twister with the opposite sex. You know where you want to put your hand, but you're scared of touching things you shouldn't. And some models are open and easy to paint, but as soon as you glue on that base, the entire underside of it becomes impossible to reach. Plus, if you like making a bit more of your bases, then it pays to go with option 2, but many models now have the ubiquitous tactical rock attached to feet or legs or whatever. Surely it can't take much more design effort to not attach a rock to a body. The third option, sub-assemblies, is usually my preferred choice on more complex models, as I'm not so great at getting my brush where the sun don't shine. I'm often amazed watching a painting video where the person is shoving the brush up into tiny gaps really slowly and carefully to paint hard to reach places, desperately keeping that hand steady and trying not to accidentally hit the carefully laid down zenithal. Especially when everything could have been painted 10 times quicker had the head or wings or cloak or dangly hair not been glued on in the first place. And well, there are some cases where it's utterly impractical anyway, no matter what people might say. Take this face mask on this guy. I can absolutely see his face. But if I'd glued that mask on, forget it. I'm not poking my brush through those tiny holes to paint his skin. But for this video, let's talk tools. I'm sure I don't need to tell you what tools you need, but for anyone new to this, I'll go over them anyway. And well, it lets me make a load of my own models while filming it for this video. 2 birds, 1 tactical stone. You're going to need 4 tools only. A good pair of hobby clippers, a scalpel or hobby knife, a sanding file, and some plastic glue or super glue. Let's start with glue, because chances are you picked up some of that Citadel glue with the metal tube sticking out the top. And you know what? It's not bad when it works. It's far better than the nail varnish we all used to use. But you'll spend more time fighting with the pot than actually gluing models, because it inevitably clogs, worse than not getting enough fibre in your diet. Yes, there's an easy fix, because you literally just pull out the needle, insert it back in the other way around, and the glue in the pot melts the clog in the tube, and on you go. And you've also got this Revel contactor stuff that's almost identical, but in a blue pot. In fact, they're probably made at the same factory, in China. There's also Army Painter's glue, which I find a bit thick and gloopy and not very precise, but there are in fact loads of other brands you can pick. Many are awful to work with. But why waste your time with this stuff when Tamiya Extra Thin Cement is better and has a little tiny brush for precise application? However, only ever buy this stuff once to get the pot with the brush. When it comes time to refill it, go and pick up some Tamiya airbrush cleaner, as chemically, it's exactly the same stuff but costs less and comes in a bigger bottle. Then just use this to refill your brush pot. Now I say that, but here in the UK, this cleaner is almost impossible to find. If anyone finds some that's not delivered from Europe at twice the price, please let me know. So instead I have to get this stuff from AK Interactive, which works identically and is easier to get. So I end up cleaning and refilling my Tamiya pot with this, because weirdly I can get Tamiya locally, but not the AK variant that's in the exact same style pot. Yeah, it's weird. I can get the Tamiya brush pot but not the airbrush cleaner as a refill, and I can get the AK refill but not the AK brush pot. So just pick the one you can get easily. This type of plastic glue is not going to work for resin or metal miniatures. Plastic glue works by effectively melting the parts together, which makes an incredibly strong bond. More Daniel Craig, less Aaron Taylor Johnson. This stuff just doesn't work on metal, and resin isn't plastic, so it won't melt. With these, the best option is still some form of super glue. And sure, you can use super glue on plastic minis too. Plastic glue is just better. With these things, it's personal preference as to what feels good in your hand. Now, I've always leaned towards these cheap surgical scalpel looking things with a pointy triangle shaped blade. In fact, this one here, I've had since 1995. I just keep buying new, huge, cheap boxes of blades from Amazon. I find those retractable ones a bit useless for models, as the mechanism often breaks, and branded hobby ones don't offer any extra benefit for all that extra cost. And someone bought me this, which is great, but it's on a spring mechanism, for those times when you really want safety to trump usefulness. Do not get the Citadel mold line remover tool. I have no idea what kind of model that was actually designed for. It's too big to fit into most places, and let's face it, it's just a random bit of metal stuck to a handle. It works no better than a kitchen knife. But more recently I've fallen in love with this thing from a brand with the strangest name I've ever seen. DSPIAE. I honestly don't know if it's an acronym or if I meant to try and say it as a word. This is a cutting broach. I think it's actually for widening holes, so if you're drilling gun barrels, it's fantastic. But I like tools that can have more than one purpose, and this is a pointy end with multiple sharp edges for tidy up, a superfine point for getting into recesses, and the back end has a sharp flat chisel that can just scrape away mould lines easily. And it's just really a nice piece of engineered design with magnetic lids. It's a bit more costly at £15 for both handle and blade, but as it does quite a few different things very well, I don't mind. I'm actually really starting to like the tools from this brand. Their clippers are next on my list. Clippers or nippers are the only tool I'd recommend not saving money on. Cheap ones will chew the plastic like you were removing parts with a knife and fork. You might as well bite the parts off with your teeth. And things like the Citadel ones that look really cool and futuristic aren't precise or pointy enough to get at really small parts. I will use mine now for cutting through the actual sprue. I use these ones from Tamiya that are super sharp, have a small enough tip to get into tightly packed sprues, but are way more expensive than most. But believe me, skimp on this cost at your peril, because ripping parts off a sprue badly causes way more work down the line. You might be tempted to sharpen these things, and it is kinda possible with fine grit sandpaper, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Sharpening anything has to remove part of the cutting edge. Once you do that, the blades become further apart, so they won't clip properly. To work, the blades on these things have to meet perfectly. Having said this, I said this series was about options, and it's unfair to push everyone down the more expensive route. I mean, the cost of models is enough already. These are cuticle cutters. They came in a nail file set that my wife bought me because she thought they looked like good modelling tools. At least that's what she said. Maybe she was trying to give me a hint. These cuticle cutters work almost as well as hobby clippers with maybe less longevity. You just need to practice good snipping etiquette, which I'll detail in the next video. If you're making metal miniatures that require some clipping, or you're thinking of cutting paper clips to pin your model to a cork or something, do not use the same clippers used for plastic or resin. Yes, I know it sounds obvious to many of us, but you'd be surprised how many people I know who've ruined a pair by trying to kit bash a metal model using plastic clippers. Get a pair designed for metal models. For sanding, I'm sure we can all agree that what we need is a larger grit to remove big chunks of plastic and a smaller grit to smooth it all off. Yes? Okay. Go to your local supermarket or pharmacy and try to stealth your way to the makeup section. Find the nail files shelf and pick up a bunch of nail files. Maybe a cuticle cutter or two. You see, I'd spent a small fortune on hobby files which don't last very long until I realised nail files are designed to do exactly the same thing. It's not often you see a manicurist with nails that look like they've been playing in a sand pit. These types of spongy files are way cheaper and can be cut up into perfect sizes. I just sliced this one into this shape and used one side for removal and the other side for smoothing. And I used them on my models too. Metal models are going to need metal files. Now, it's been a long time since I made a metal model, but I got these ones from Army Painter. Now, if I'm honest, I've had loads of these types of files over 30 years, and there's very little difference between them all. Just make sure whatever you get are small enough to get at tiny parts. You're never going to be able to remove tiny mold lines with a cheese grater. There is a fifth tool that is optional and really depends on the model you're building, and that's a gap filler. Now, obviously, if there's no gaps on the model, then you don't need this stuff, but often you'll find parts don't glue together perfectly, or there's just an annoying gap left anyway. You can totally leave it if it doesn't bother you, but if it does, then you've got a few options to plug that hole. Green stuff, milliput, sprue goo and plastic putty. And at a push, you can use a texture paint if you can find a smooth one and use it sparingly. Something like Sterland Mud from Citadel works a treat for small gaps, but it will shrink, so keep that in mind. I personally can't stand green stuff or milliput for this job, as it's a load of extra work kneading and squishing this stuff just to shove it in a hole. It's like long disappointing anticlimactic foreplay. And sprue goo is just highly toxic sludge. Get any of that stuff on you and you'll either become a superhero or end up looking like the Joker. If you wanted to make some, and on your head be it, you cut up a load of leftover plastic sprues and dump it in a pot of plastic glue. It's actually a really good use for that leftover Citadel glue once you've upgraded to the Tamiya stuff. The sprue parts melt in the glue and become a thick grey slop that hardens when dry, and you can use it to fill gaps. But it's fiddly, sticky, stretchy, hard to use accurately, and smells like a petrol station. Great idea, but then so was the Thigh Master. By far my favourite, due to no mess, ease of use, and the small pointy end, is plastic putty in a tube from Vallejo. You simply squeeze what you need into the gap, take a damp brush and smooth it off, let it dry, and that gap is filled. It's the most miraculous way to fill a hole since Mary and Joseph. So you've got your tools and a bunch of models, now you can start, right? Pull out all those instructions and get to work. Kind of. But we'll get onto that in the next video. Yes, this video was originally one long video, but when I'd finished it, I realised that looking at grey sprues for nearly 30 minutes, although more interesting and exciting than Fear the Walking Dead Season 8, wasn't what I wanted to put out. A conversation that AMC should probably have had with their own writers. In the next video, I'm going to go into detail on all the best ways to get parts off a sprue, how to read the instructions so you can paint easier, and how you can stick the model together without actually sticking the model together for priming. If you're looking for any hobby product recommendations, tips and tricks, or mini painting books, you can find them on my website at thestateofplay.co.uk. And feel free to join my Patreon where you can chat directly with me and I can hopefully answer any questions you might have. Thanks to my amazing patrons, and thank you for letting me build a load of models that have just sat on my shelf for ages. And that's the state of play for today. I'll catch you soon.